Well, welcome everybody, and welcome to this Lunch and Learn. I'm really excited about this one. This has been an issue that over the last year in particular, I've seen that this question keeps popping up in my head as I look at all the volume of work that we are seeing come through Procedure Solutions. It's very troubling sometimes to see the extent of some of the problems that we do see. And so I've kind of made it my personal drive here to figure this out. Like, why do we keep saying this? And we say this internationally with all the different clients we have. So it's just not something that's located here in the US. It's something that is very international overall. So anyway, the topic this I called this was balancing procedures, training, and leadership for performance. And so I'm going to jump right into the slides and I'll explain more as we kind of go along. So here it comes. Here it is. Introduction wise, we're a small woman-owned business located out of Stuart, Florida, here just north of Palm Beach. This material will be available to you, and is all our introduction about our values and the different services. And I mean, we've been in business for over 16 years now, and we work with some of the largest energy companies in the world globally, along with almost every utility here in the United States. In Canada and a little bit into Central America. So we pretty broad in the different areas that we reach between the utility industry and the refining oil and gas industries are probably our biggest areas of focus, right? And from there, so let's look at the problem statement. So as a company, Procedure Solutions, we have human factored literally thousands of procedures over the last 16 years, right? Now, this process involves analyzing the cognitive and physical aspects of human performance concerning tasks, and then designing the procedures to help optimize human performance using a Procedure Professionals Association standard as our primary guidance. And that was something that my wife and I were actually the project managers for the development of in the nuclear industry over 20 plus some years ago. Our services started, as I noted here, in the commercial nuclear power industry, although they reach almost all high-risk industries globally today, right? So our focus supports our customers with instruction, consulting, raising awareness of the importance of developing procedures, instructions with a human performance improvement focus, in addition to the typical focus on safety and technical adequacy, which is also obviously equally important. Now, as we have evolved as a business and matured in our understanding of what good looks like to develop the perfect human factor procedure, our expanding knowledge and experience has enabled us to more easily identify hidden, significant quality, production, and safety challenges. The question is, why are these problems occurring consistently? You know, we have focused very heavily on the last 16 years in helping educate our customers in this process that the commercial nuclear power industry has been using for many years. That was a result of adverse trends that they were noting from an agency called INPO, the Institute of Nuclear Power Operations. And so they focus on these issues where procedures, although they were looked upon as being technically correct and safe, they were still missing something, you know, and they were leading challenges to what they call plant availability, which means the plants are big plants are designed to come to 100% power, stay there literally for 2 years, where there's enough fuel in that reactor to run it for 2 years, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And yet still, anytime the power plant was to drop down below 100% power, it sends a trigger and a performance indicator to this INPO organization that's at Atlanta, Georgia. And they started seeing trends 20 plus years ago on procedure problems. And there was a lot of denial about that. They said, you know, by pound mass, there's more regulations that we have in any other industry. And so we have more procedures than anybody else. And obviously, we should be better at doing it. Well, not so much. What they were probably having problems with was the usability associated with procedures, which then later was really classified as being the human performance associated with the use of procedures, the interaction between the person and the procedure and the tasks that they were performing, and that interaction and the successfully performed tasks, you know? So today's Lunch and Learn will focus on what we are seeing as an imbalance between leadership, training, and procedures. This imbalance is a global issue that greatly impacts employee performance, safety, and reliability. Now, a review of available industry operating sources, experience from sources such as the CSB, Chemical Safety Board, Occupational Safe and Health Administration, which is OSHA here in the United States, and the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics notes that this imbalance is a major contributor to significant industrial accidents and reoccurring workplace injuries. So first, let's talk about where our focus is, right? John Maxwell, one of the American authors, speaker, and pastor, has a statement in one of his books that I thought was pretty profound to go along with this discussion we're having today. And one of the statements he says is that what is the greatest expression of belief in another person? How can I value you the most, right? And his statement is equipping them. Let's give them the best tools and make sure that they have the best things that they could use to be successful, right? So equipping is that belief in action. And so sometimes I think we forget the fact that for some of us who are like procedure authors or supervisors and leaders, and we're worried, we're day in and day in, we're focused, we're going from meeting to meeting, and we have this discussion and this operational problem and this issue, and we get wrapped up in the day-to-day world. We forget what we're really there for, right? It's because it's the people. It's us. It's the people that are going to make you successful, or it's the people that are going to make you have a bad day, right? And so we got to equip them and make sure they have the best tools available to help them be unlike themselves, which is human, where people make mistakes, right? Now, do we have the right paradigm here? This is actually on the screen here is actually a poster that I took a picture of from one of my most recent clients. And notice what the focus is here. It says, so I say here, when you think about performance, where is today's primary focus for achieving consistent results? And this has really summed it up. I was in a classroom at electric power utility in a company, right, at a power plant. And this is was right on the whole room. It was, that was that big. It was like a big billboard on the wall. And it says training owns performance. And I got thinking about that, and that's really what I see. I see a lot of that. Especially you get into the large energy companies, oil and gas, I see where fundamentally, historically, they have this, what they call competency-based system. They have competency managers, and it's based on training, right? And then on the other wall, on the other side of the classroom, what I saw was this one. And this was, they were opposing each other, right? The line or the shops, the craft owns training. I thought, okay, but is that really true? Not whether they own it, but back to this other slide. Is training really solely the owner for performance? And I got thinking about that. And here I am, I own a procedure company. We focus on procedures, human factor procedures and work instructions and maintenance. And I would say I would disagree with that. I think it's more than just training. I think it's training and procedures and work instructions. I think collectively those two work hand in hand. But then I got thinking about it more, and I think, you know what? I think it's even more than that. So before we get into that, like the whole picture of that, where am I going? So let's look at some results, right? So here are some statistics from OSHA here in the United States. And if you look over there, imagine this today, here you're at this lunch and learn with us, and some of you have attended my classes. You probably heard me talk about this in our classes that we teach, right? Think about it. For over 19,000 people between the end of this lunch and learn and before the time that you go home and get in your car or truck, whatever, in the parking lot, today you're going to go home with one less body part. Not possible, right? Steve, there's no way. Well, there was over 19,000 people that thought the same thing, but yet it did happen to them, right? Maybe it's not that significant. Maybe you're not going to go home with one less body part, but you got one body part that's pretty damaged, and you're end up going to be in the hospital today before you get home, right? You're going to have to call a relative or a friend to go get your car out of the parking lot. Or worst case, imagine having this lunch and learn And today, my voice is the last thing that you hear. Not possible, right? But then between 2021 and 2022, there was over 5,000 people that today was their last day. And it was a 5.7% increase from 2021. That's not good, right? Then you look at the results even further. This is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. A worker dies, this is completely unimaginable to me. A worker dies in the United States from a workplace accident every 96 minutes. 96 minutes, right? Now, this is worse than what it was in 2021, where it was 101 minutes. And if you look at the trend here, this has been going on, well, at least from the time that this chart started in 2013. You can see that the overall trend going across here isn't getting any better. Yeah, now you would think with experiences and lessons learned and operating experience and technology that it should be going the opposite direction, not getting worse, right? So how's that happening, right? Chemical Safety Board, the leading investigative government agency for industrial accidents. And if you go down here in the middle and some of the key statistics from their website, in the fiscal year 2023, the number of reportable incidents increased by 51% compared to the previous year. Incidents involving serious injury were up 11%. Those involving deaths increased a notable 78%. What the heck is going on right here, right? You would think with the world that we live in today and the technology that's available as compared to my father or my grandfather, my great-grandfather, you would think, is it just that the statistics are getting better, that the tracking of this stuff is getting better, but it's not really getting more? I don't think so. I think pretty much it is what it is in here, right? Now, go to OSHA's website, right? So here they published the top 10 list of 2023. Actually, they just published a preliminary list for 2024, and it's almost identical. If anything, it's getting worse. And so here's the top 10 list. Now, these are serious violations, right? Serious violation is one in which there's a substantial probability that death or serious physical harm could result, and the employer knew it or should have known of the hazard. Now, if you look at the top 10 list, a number of these all have to do with falls or the training on how to prevent falls. Now, I pulled this out because, again, this gets into the more, I use this slide in our procedure training that we do, the 20-hour course that we offer. And when you look at that, these four items here in particular, as I stammer there, these four items, if you drill down into the event causes for this stuff, have a lot of procedure related issues with this. So here on one hand, we have procedure related problems. On the other hand, I was kind of starting off with, well, does training really own performance? Obviously, if training owns performance, one of the things down here, number 9, fall protection training requirements. And it was kind of, not funny, but you get into the, for the training piece of that stuff. Here it is. It says, the program shall enable each employee to recognize hazards of falling and shall train each employee in the procedures to be followed to minimize these hazards, right? Energy control procedures for lockout, tagout, which that amazes me too, right? Hazard communication. This gets into like safety data sheets and exposure to chemicals, and the fact that employers should have a program, so that they have written hazard communication program pieces to it. And there's been all kinds of violations for this. Oh, but it gets better. Now look at this one, 2023. These are willful violations. I've never seen them publish a list of willful violations before, right? That doesn't mean they didn't. I just never seen one before, right? But you look at it, what does OSHA define as a willful violation? These are violations where someone committed an intentional disregard or just plain indifference to the requirements for OSHA, right? Now it's interesting down here yet. Here's fall protection training. And if you look at it, retraining was one of the violations for willful violations. And this is retraining when the employer has reason to believe that any affected employee who has already been trained does not have the understanding skill required by this section. The employer shall retrain people. there's 12 violations there where people knew they needed to retrain people and they didn't. So, well, we just given up on safety overall here? I mean, what's going on with this stuff, right? So now you go over and look at this. This was from back in 2010. It just celebrated what is 14th year anniversary. And the total cost of this bill for this most environmental challenge episode accident in U.S. history there in the Gulf of Mexico, when they had an explosion from some testing they were performing on the Deepwater Horizon. If you guys haven't seen the movie, I highly recommend it. It's a little dramatized, but overall, it's amazing that anyone lived on this thing. And you look at this thing, and it's really an epitome of people making mistakes, human performance challenges, training issues, right? And so here it was, it's up to over $60 billion in damage now. It keeps climbing, right? Now you look at this, and so the Chemical Safety Board investigated this accident back in 2010. And I went through about the 700-page report that you as public domain. You can actually print it out yourself on the internet. And this is one statement that really caught my interest in that whole encyclopedia of findings that they had in this accident. And so this is interesting. So they were doing some testing on this day, and the testing really wasn't going well for them. It failed. And so they tried to test it in a different manner. And when they went to test it in the different matters, when the explosion occurred, they had some equipment failures, and there's a video that we show in our training for it, right? But look at the caption here. This is a quote from the Chemical Safety Board. So what happened was there was a company called Transocean who actually owns this rig that you see on fire here. And they were contracted by BP to actually drill a hole 2 miles down into the seafloor there in the Gulf of Mexico. And then they would tap oil. And after they hit oil, this rig moves out of the way, and then they put another rig in place, and it pumps oil until it's gone, right? Which would be many, many years, right? And so now what happens is that when this accident occurred, there was kind of a fight there between Transocean and BP, or someone's got a $60 million or $60 billion bill coming their way, right? Not to mention all the negative publicity and everything else, and the lives that were impacted from the fatalities, which is horrific in itself, right? But here, look at this statement in this report. It said an expert hired by BP to review, after the accident, to review these test activities that they were performing. And the comment from this expert is the rig crew does not have to be told how to run this negative test. So that's the name of the test. It's called a negative test. This should be a routine operation that fits within their training. So there is a complete expert that is missing some of the fundamental human performance principles, which one of the primary principles in human performance is people make mistakes. But yet this expert is saying, we don't need to have procedures. This fits within their training, and they should be able to, we train on this. It should be good. Well, obviously didn't end up that way, right? Chemical Safety Board investigator came back, and the very next sentence there, which is number 317, it says, this sentiment does not address the fact that procedures are more than set of instructions. They're actually tools for the competent people that BP is saying that they don't need any procedures. Chemical Safety Board is saying, no, you need procedures. The procedures are for those competent people that you're saying don't need them, right? Motivated people, right? People there to coordinate, verify. And here's the big kicker right at the very end of the sentence. Assure performance will achieve the intended results. So if you want to achieve those intended results, it's much more than performance based on training alone. The Chemical Safety Board is coming back and saying, hey guys, and I use that literally for everybody, for all you ladies, it's just a mannerism of mine, right? But for all you inclusively, is that when you look at it right here to this point in this presentation today, they're saying it's just not procedures. It's just not training. It's both of these that have to work together, right? Because in the end, the crew that died that day was left to put something together to get the work done. It wasn't very successful for them, right? Now, let's shift over to the pharmaceutical industry for a minute, right? So here they're talking in this article that I got from the internet from the pharmaceutical was first there was an accident that actually occurred in Baltimore, and so we'll talk about that in a second. But they said, hey, human error is a significant challenge in the pharmaceutical industry, and causes can be very multifaceted, right? Firstly, lack of training and education is a common cause for human error. So there's a good plug for training, obviously, right? Then it says, without adequate training and education, employees may not understand the importance of following standard operating procedures. There it comes back again. It's just not training owns performance. It's kind of saying here in these other slides that it's training and procedures. And for some of you guys that may be work instruction planners, that use interchangeably. So those written instructions and training work together, and they will help us ensure that it's right. Now, it says, in order to reduce human error in the pharmaceutical manufacturing, it's critical to have a strong quality control procedures in place. Give staff members extensive training and assistance, and promote environmental and values for accountability, right? Implementing well-designed SOPs is a fundamental in minimizing human error. These SOPs provide step-by-step guidelines for laboratory operations, ensuring consistencies and testing procedures and reducing the likelihood of mistakes, right? Then they come back and they say, well, what's the cost of this? Emergent Biosolutions, a manufacturer there in Maryland, in Baltimore, they had a $628 million contract with the U.S. government for manufacturing vaccines, right? Well, anyway, ultimately they made a mistake, human error, and it led to basically 45 million doses of this vaccine having to be destroyed. The company had to forego $180 million when the government canceled this contract. The shares of that company dropped by 37%. So while human errors are costly, the good news is that these mistakes are often preventable. In this case, many mistakes revolved around inadequate procedures or employees not following procedures. Some of the employees weren't properly trained. Some procedures, they just couldn't even find them. But yet again, notice in the emphasis here, it's just not training owns performance. It's training and procedures in there. So why do I find in a lot of plants I go to, there may be a training department and they got a staff of 50, 60 people, and I find 2 procedure writers? Now, what sense does that make? Is there a balance there? Doesn't seem like it is, and it's getting worse. Now, the following slides will discuss several considerations that, when taken collectively, we feel builds an argument that successful performance is much more than just training or competency-based focus. We need to recognize first about human performance. So we talked about it a little bit. So let's look at definitions: a system of processes, values, behaviors. Ultimately, it's results that determine performance. As much as that is a textbook definition for human performance, let's look at the principles. I think this is the one we should walk away with the most in here. Is overall, we need to recognize that none of us are perfect. People do make mistakes. Matter of fact, those mistakes are so prevalent that error is predictable. I just showed you some trends from OSHA in the U.S. Bureau of Labor that talked about that even. Now, organizationally, it can influence behaviors. So we all work for companies. You have corporate, you have the department you work in, you have leadership, you have supervision. All that is there to influence behaviors, hopefully in a positive way, although it can also do it negatively if we're not careful, right? Those behaviors are going to be reinforced, yet again, either both positively or negatively, right? And as an investigator of myself and doing assessments, we find out that almost everything that I've looked at in the last so many years, done over 30 some of these things, and just in the recent years, has been avoidable. Every single one of them, even the fatality investigations that we do, right? Now, Professor James Reason, which some people would say is one of the founding fathers for the human performance, human performance initiatives that you see around today, is that that one of the statements he's made in one of his books is that, the best people can make some of the worst mistakes. And that's really true. You can really see that, right? So one of the things that we need to realize is that when you and I perform work, any of us or any of our staff, there's 3 different performance modes that we all can go through when we do things. Now, what happens is when you look at these performance modes, when you go from one step in a procedure to the next step to the next step, you can actually move through all 3 of these performance modes and back and forth, depending on the step, the level of detail, the amount of complexity to the step and all that stuff. And so what happens is that what's going to be depicted on the following slides is that we want to make sure that every one of these performance modes has its own level of risk. And we want to make sure that as we evaluate the balance between training and procedures and leadership, that one of our primary responsibilities as leaders is to ensure that tasks performed by the staff are accomplished at the lowest level of human performance risk possible. So our goal here, even with this webinar, is the fact to try to give you some additional tools and evaluation purposes to kind of go out and look and like, are we giving people the best tools for the job they have to perform at the lowest risk possible? Because again, the focus, like on one of the first slides I show you, is not on me and you. The focus is on people. We need to value our people, and we're not doing that enough. The people that work with us and for us will help us be successful, or they will also be our demise, right? And so we want to have the lowest level of human performance risk possible to ensure successful execution is done consistently, right? And so here are the 3 performance modes. Now look at the different risk ranges to this, and you could Google this and see this yourself. You can look at all this up, and there's all kinds of articles written by numerous human factor engineers, which I'm not, right? But you can look at this and look at this. So the first thing I want to look at, I'm talking about skill base for a second, right? I have 42 years of industrial experience, commercial, new, operations manager, licensed person, I mean, whatever, degree, all those different pieces. And when you look at that, I would say that I'm very skilled in what I do, but that's not what this is talking about. Skill-based performance is when you give instructions to your staff. If those instructions are something that are less than 7 steps and they perform them greater than 50 times, then if we were going to give someone an instructions there, as we write these things ourselves, if you look at a step has 3 parts to it: the who, the what, and the how. Now, the who can be implied if it's the same who doing all the work. But then we have a big decision to make. For every step that someone reads, they got to make a conscious decision as a writer. Do we tell someone what to do, or do we tell someone how to do it? Now, if it's a series of steps, it's less than 7 steps, excuse me, and they could be within a big procedure, but there's a block of 7 steps in that procedure, and it's something that's been performed greater than 50 times, all I got to tell you is what to do, because we look at it as that you're in skill base at that point, and I don't need to tell you how to do that. You've got enough experience there that you know how to do that through your training experience, right? And so we can leave it at. Now, you have a chance of 1 in 100 or 1 in 1,000 chance, or 10,000 chance that you're going to make a mistake, statistically. Now, if you move up and say, okay, well, let's look at rule base. Well, what is rule base? Rule base is that I'm going to hand you a set of instructions, whether they're work instructions or procedures. There's different names for that stuff out there, depending on what industry you're at. But if I give you that set of instructions, coupled with your knowledge and your training, is that now you have your error rate is 1 in 100 to 1 in 1,000 rate that you're going to make a mistake, as long as that procedure is human factored and is written well. Otherwise, you can embed mistakes in that, and now you have even the worst kind of tool imaginable, is that management thinks that they've given you a procedure, but if it's not written properly, you've just been handed a problem more than something that's meant to be something that's helping you with your success and lowering your risk. It's raising your risk, right? And so as long as that procedure is written well, look at your error rate, 1 in 100 to 1 in 1,000, right? But now let's look at knowledge base. Knowledge base means one of 2 things, is that whatever you've been assigned to do, you're doing completely from your head, the training that was provided to you. So it's based on your training and the knowledge that you have. There is no instructions with it. You've been told, hey, you need to go start this pump or whatever it may be. And from your experience, even though if it's got greater than 7 steps and you perform it less than 50 times, you are not in skill base. You're a knowledge base with an error rate of 1 to 2 to 1 in 10. Now, why am I saying this? See, you could make an argument here is that when you look at training owns performance, all right, but what's the risk with that? If you just say training owns performance, and then you look at the human performance attributes of that, where people make mistakes, training, and many times there's tasks being performed out in the field where they think, oh, well, they're trained now, they're skilled. No, they're trained and they're a knowledge base with a 1 to 2 to 1 in 10 error rate. That's literally a flip of a coin. So that's why you go back and look at the CSB and Chemical Safety Board, and over here they're saying to you, they say, look, overall, this sentiment doesn't address the fact that procedures are more than they're tools for competent people, motivated people. Verify and assure performance will achieve the intended, assure performance will achieve the intended. It takes both of them to assure the performance, right? Now, notice in this sentence right here, minimizing the difference between WAI and WAD requires a participation in individual. Hold that thought for a minute. Notice they mentioned WAI and WAD there, right? Now watch this. So here we are. We're talking about the 3 performance modes, right? So here we are, skill-based, less than 7 steps performed greater than 50 times. Rule-based, right? The application of store rules address familiar problems. Alternatively, let's look at knowledge-based. They say workers, notice this is should here, should never be in knowledge-based performance mode when executing procedures. The worker finds himself in the knowledge-based mode. And again, this is on the 1 to 2 side of that scale, right? Document lacks adequate detail. It's unclear. It's unsafe. Just doesn't work. Worker safely stops the job and contacts their supervisor, right? They're knowledge-based. Now, knowledge-based mistakes result from what we call trial and error, right? I can call Sarah and say, hey, Sarah, I need you to do this. All right, Steve, I'll take care of that right away. She's very, very good at what she does. But overall, I asked her to do something. I didn't give her a set of instructions. Now she's completely in knowledge base to go. Now she's hoping that the communication between the two of us has been clear. It's completely understandable. She understands the scope of what I asked. And how often does that happen? And so overall, she has a trial ahead of her. Now, the fact is that knowledge-based mistakes happen when there's a trial and then they have an error. Now, in these cases, insufficient knowledge about performing a task resulted in her developing a solution that was incorrectly expected to work, right? Now, why should we care about this? Ultimately, our focus here as leaders is that we need to manage knowledge-based performance. I'm not saying to get rid of it. Well, there's many, many, many things we do every single day. You can't drive a car without being a knowledge base unless you sit there as you're driving, you're reading the owner's manual as you're going down the road. And who does that, right? Or at least doesn't do it well, right? So overall, we have to manage this, right? We have to manage this performance. That means we got to manage the understanding of when training is fine and the procedure can be, no procedures needed, or we need that combination to assure performance will get the results. We need both training and performance, training and procedures, right? To be able to do that. Now, remember I told you about the work as imagined and that WAI-WD that the Chemical Safety Board throws in that last sentence in that report. So here's what they're talking about. Now, work as imagined is what engineers, planners, and advisors and managers or anyone else involved in the design believe, and work should be done under ideal circumstances. So this is some picture that you have. So like even when you're going to write a procedure, many times, we walk the job down, we take pictures of things, we get this vision in our head and how they're going to start, what shop supplies they need, what tools are going to need, what parts, what inspections, and we visualize all this stuff and we write all those things down, right? Now, work is imagined, picture determines how a process is set up, how people are trained. Imagine that. So when training is developed, obviously the training instructor is developing some picture about how this work is supposed to be performed. And now I'm going to train all of you on how to go out there and do it, just like the procedure training that we give, that we have on our website, right? So you look at that and we say, all right, 20 hours of instruction. I'm imagining in the end, once you have all that training, how you're going to write procedures from that point going forward, right? And so it says work is imagined, picture determines how a process is set up, how people are trained, and which controls, procedures must be implemented, right? Now, work is done is what people do to get the job done, taking into account the realities of the situation, such as equipment configurations, ease of use of the procedure or the lack of, right? Time and resources. Those who have to do work may want to adjust the plans set out and the work as imagined to get their work done. If this happens without appropriate support leadership, shortcuts may be taken or other habits adopted that can lead to errors. So what I'm trying to get at there is that the difference between work, if you look at the difference, the gap between work as imagined and work as done, you have a gap between the two, right? Now, if this is not properly acknowledged and supported, work can be adjusted safely, reducing risk, increasing reliability, increasing engagement, right? So what we're trying to say is that we want to try between the training and procedures to minimize that gap between how it's imagined work is going to be done and how work actually is performed. We have got to eliminate that gap to the best that we can. Now, vague interpretive procedures can lead to misinterpretation of the steps required to complete the task, making the task more complex and difficult to complete. Leaders play a pivotal role in setting clear expectations and monitoring compliance. Their failure to do so can significantly contribute to non-compliance or basically failure. So far today, we've examined how industry events tell us we are not doing something right. When I look at the thousands of procedures we have improved for our clients over the last 16 years, something is not right. As a company, we have consistently endorsed industry standards from the Procedure Professionals Association, that's our website there, for developing human factor procedures. That is our focus. Now, and they've been very, very effective, but they're still not enough. A sole focus on training or competency, which has been the mainstay for industry for years, is not working as successfully as in the past, and a new paradigm is needed. Contrarily to proper thought, training does not own performance. It's bigger than just training. If you're looking at operating experience, typically after an accident, what's one of the first questions that get asked? What did the procedure say? Now, this leads me to leadership. Okay. The following slides are taken from John Maxwell's The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. In his book, he writes the following, and I took 2 of the laws out of there that I wanted to focus on. There's 19 others there you could add that collectively, when you add them all together, comes back to really quantifying this even better, right? The law of the lid. Okay. Now, leadership ability determines a person's level of effectiveness. Leadership ability is the lid. The lower an individual's ability to lead, the lower the lid and his or her potential. The higher the leadership, the greater the effectiveness. So, for example, if you look at yourself and say, where would I put myself on a scale of 1 to 10 on my leadership ability, with 10 being perfect and 1 being you got a lot of work, right? Now, if your leadership rate's an 8, your effectiveness can never be greater than a 7. If your leadership is only a 4, your effectiveness will not be any higher than a 3. Your leadership ability, for better or for worse, always determines your effectiveness and the potential impact on your organization. Personal and organizational effectiveness is proportionate to the strength of leadership. So when I go back and look at these issues, I see on one side, there's a focus on training. People who are in training instructors, they think that they own performance. You come over and look at the procedure writers and the planners. They know they have their hands deep into the performance, right? Because what's the first thing that happens when something goes wrong? They go back and look at it. So the procedure wasn't right. All right. So we know that procedures and training play pivotal roles here in what would be your and my success, right? Then you go back and look at leadership from the aspect of what I like to call the law of navigation. Anyone can steer the ship, but it takes a leader to chart the course. Leroy Eames, author of Be the Leader You Were Meant to Be, writes, a leader is one who sees more than others see, who sees farther than others see, and who sees before others do. Now, in that section of the book that Maxwell writes in there, a couple of bullets he has in there. Navigators draw on past experience. Every past success and failure can be a source of information and wisdom if you allow it to be, right? Navigators listen to what others have to say. No matter how much you learn from the past, it will never tell you all you need to know for the present. That's why top-notch navigators gather information from many sources, not only themselves, right? Navigators examine the conditions before making commitments. Good navigators count the costs before making commitments for themselves and others. Navigators make sure that their conclusions represent both faith and fact. Being able to navigate for others requires a leader possess a positive attitude. You must be able to see the facts realistically. You can't minimize obstacles or rationalize your challenges. If you don't go in with your eyes wide open, you're going to be blindsided. Now, why do I make a point between these two pieces in here? Now, in the last 16 years, we've had the ability to train over 23,000 people, human factor writing, right? Procedure Professionals Association certifications with things, right? Work instruction certifications, all that. Our focus is on procedure solutions and how to manage them. But you know what I find it's very concerning to me is that people have been supported by their leadership to attend our classes. And then what's the biggest comment I have after the classes there? Steve, you know, leadership does not want to follow the things that you put out in the class. Sorry about that. Leadership does not want to follow the things in the class. How do we help them to see this? Why is that? Why did you take the time to pay for someone to come to the class? But yet then when they bring back a lot of enthusiasm and say, hey, we can really make differences here, then there's the pushback. Is that effective leadership? So as noted in conclusion here, there's a need for balance. As noted, for many years, training and supervisory oversight have been the primary focal points for ensuring work quality and productivity across all industries. However, today, industry's got to realize and recognize through industry events, operating experience, that reliable performance is no longer occurring. And a shift is needed. Now more than ever, a renewed focus on providing a balance between leadership, training, and procedures is needed. So it was where I showed you that chart in the very beginning on that poster that was on the wall, that leadership owns performance. I would say that's incorrect today. That's out of date. And I think you need to recognize that because it's more than that. If you got a room filled of training instructors and you've got 2 procedure writers, you don't have balance. If her procedures look like they're written on a cocktail napkin with a crayon, you don't have balance. And if leadership doesn't recognize these things, then leadership is disconnected also. And I'm one of them. And I have been one of them. So I'm talking with some authority that I know myself. I've had room for improvement, or have had room for improvement. But I see it today with this. If you look at this, this is like 3 legs of a stool. If any one of these 3 areas is not balanced, you have a problem, because that person who's sitting on that stool isn't going to be sitting there for very long. And then you're going to be part of the statistics that was in the earlier part of this presentation for this lunch and learn. Anyway, I hope that kind of gives some insight to things. So here is a procedure organization that is trying to tell you from the procedure side of the world that it's not us all alone. And if you happen to be on the training side, it's not you all by yourself. And if you're an overall manager, the department, and you're not seeing this, you need to step back and understand yourself. Well, why am I not seeing this? What am I not hearing? Are my past biases preventing me from seeing something until it's too late? And then you're forced to see it. You do not want to be in that spot. I've done way too many accident investigations, fatality investigations over the last so many years. And to have be sitting across the table from someone like myself asking you after you're already not feeling really well from what's happened. I had one customer not long ago that missed one step in a procedure, and it cost them $50 million in damage. And the only reason they didn't kill 7 people was because they were inside a hurricane-proof building when the explosion occurred. That was that. It blew out all the windows in our admin building. They were hurricane-proof windows and blew out the windows, right? There was just a article just came out in the news today about a food coloring manufacturer and a huge explosion that they just had, right? So I'm trying to say to this stuff happens. And I think we all need to kind of look at this and rethink about where we're going with this stuff. Because if you call yourself the competency manager and you're charged of performance, I think that we got to start looking at this and it's this shared responsibility, because maybe some of that training needs to go to leadership. Maybe some of that training needs to go to procedure writers or planners to make sure that overall collectively we have the best of all 3 worlds, because all 3 areas need to be balanced, right? Anyway, I hope that you liked this today. I didn't come across too strong with it, but you know, we get to see the things I hope that you all don't ever really see. And we mean that sincerely. We want to be here to help you, and we like to be the help proactively versus reactively with stuff. Now, again, I would be amiss not to say that we offer classes for this that gets into this. We have these discussions on human performance and how to write human factor procedures. We have a winter course come up in January that we're taking reservations for now, and then we have a spring course. And overall, of course, I didn't update the last slide there. I made a mistake there. Anyway, overall, that was my my lunch and learn today. I hope that you enjoyed it. Any questions from anybody? Sarah, anybody have anything, feedback? Be willing to take any questions here now. Anybody?
Not seeing any at the moment.
Okay, well, our information is available here. We'll post this, and I gotta fix that last slide. But we have our contact information, my contact information there. Please feel free to reach out anytime. I'll be glad to, you know, if you think that I'm missing a point here or something like that, I would love to actually talk about it. We want to learn this and help you, and maybe, you know, we learn from each other. So if there's something we can learn from one another, I'd be open. I don't mean to come across arrogant here, but this is what we've seen, and I hope that maybe this helps you. But anyway, thank you all for this.